The impudence, the audacity, the unmitigated gall of those knuckleheads of liberty podcasters, daring to voice opinions outside the mainstream of accepted thought. Listen if you dare. It's angry, it's funny, it's even sometimes sad, but it's always based on freedom and justice, as you will see. Here's our host, Jason McPhee.
Welcome to the Knuckleheads of Liberty. We're coming at you on December 12th, 2022. Somehow we've survived a couple years of the current administration, but and it always seems like how we're going to get through the next day, I don't know. But we do have a special guest here to distract us from that, and this will be an interesting talk. It's Jim Babka. He's executive producer of Respect America, among many other hats that he wears. But before we jump into that, let me introduce you to our panel. In our upper left-hand corner, we have Leon, the word Brathwaite, last word in liberty. He is a retired engineer in the state of California. And our lower left-hand corner, we have our screaming eagle of freedom, Tim Everett. He is a pilot in the state of California. And on our upper right-hand corner, we have Jim Babka, Respect America. And he wears a lot of different hats, but we'll talk about a few of those as we go into the interview. But I met Jim at a screening of The Hong Konger here in Sacramento, and Respect America was involved with that, or at least bringing it here. And, gosh, he's doing a lot on the liberty front. So we like to talk to people like this too, because it might give people, if you're sitting out there watching, some ideas on how you can also get involved as well. So Jim, take it away. What's Respect America about? And tell us a little about yourself.
Well, our mission is to use real and up-close personal experiences to exhibit pathways to improved human happiness and identifying the things that block those. And we're doing it through focus on three primary themes. We want to illustrate the impact of coercion and theft that has on human happiness, harmony, and prosperity. And we want to make sure that the observer really sees it. Second, we want to present delegated agency, which means like you give away, when you deal with the government, you give away a certain amount of power, and then agents do the bad things, right? And we want to make sure that people can't unsee that. Once they've seen it, they can't unsee it. And then we want to demonstrate that this principle, which we call the principle of human respect, has no exceptions. That every time an agent uses coercion on our behalf, happiness, harmony, and prosperity decline. And so we're doing this. We're going to do this through short videos, testimonials. The very first one involves a woman named Katie. We're going to be releasing that in January. Katie lives in a state where cannabis is illegal. She has a disease that is a nerve disease. It's very painful. It's like electric shock through her body. It's an orphan disease. There's only scores of people in the country at any given moment that have it. But one of the side effects is it's eating away at her face. And she can get relief from either opioids or cannabis. And she lives in Idaho, where cannabis is illegal.
If I could stop you for just a second, James, our invisible hand, can you bring up the visual too? Because there's a website for this, and I didn't know.
Yeah, and she's right there in the center. She's the woman wearing the red scarf. She's the first story we're going to tell. That's Katie right there.
Oh, wow.
And should she be denied cannabis? That's her preferred choice, and I think it would be most people's preferred choice between that and an opioid. She would prefer to use cannabis, but it's completely 100% illegal still. It's Idaho is one of the last three remaining 100% drug war states. And, she goes and she meets with politicians, and they say, I feel your pain. And then they go right to the floor and they give a blasting message about how anybody who would use cannabis is a bad person, and that they have to protect them from themselves and us from them. And they still vote against her. And that's disrespectful. That's interfering with her happiness. That's interfering with her prosperity. We need to stop that. And we need to make sure that these stories are so visual, so visceral that people don't miss it. And that's what we're going to do at Respect America. It's a brand new organization. The party that you came to, Jason, the screening of the Hong Konger was kind of our launch event, our pre-launch event, so to speak, to kind of begin to get the word out and get our website up. But we're starting in earnest in January by telling Katie's story.
You said you're a brand new organization. So you guys have not truly launched your organization as yet?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yep. But we did put on a pretty successful event for the Hong Konger. We had that film is put up by the Acton Institute. It's a story of Jimmy Lai in Hong Kong.
Yes.
He's imprisoned by the Chinese Communist government, which has broken the treaty it had with Great Britain over the takeover of Hong Kong. His story is very compelling and moving, and we had that premiere, and it was the most successful one the Acton Institute has had thus far. So we got a good team of people to start.
I believe in the last.
Oh, sorry, Leon. I was just going to say, yes, we had Eric Cohn on the show recently, too, to talk a little bit about that as well, from the Acton Institute. So, yeah.
On the film.
Or how's that? Sorry.
He is the expert on that film. So it's a good thing you did that.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's such an important message that you're saying, respect, because I think a lot of people don't really realize that when they want to force their ideas on other people through government, they think they're doing they think my way is a great way, so wouldn't it be great if everybody else is doing it my way? But
exactly.
I think that's a good take that you guys are putting on this, is about respect, because gosh, if you don't want to let people do things their own way, then you obviously don't have much respect for it.
Right.
Yeah. Well, they always think, I mean, mostly from the left, obviously, they always think their good intentions are good enough for all of us. So their one size fit all solutions to everything is the only thing that they can propose, but it's total disrespect to us as individuals, us as sovereign people.
Yeah, and inevitably, none of us is king, including the person with their grand utopian dreams, right? Sooner or later, the other side takes over. And in fact, most of the time, people that disagree with us are in charge. And so that with the power that we give a politician that we love today to do something we really want is a power that will be used by a politician we loathe tomorrow to do things that we hate. And we have to keep that in mind all the time. That's right there, to me, that would be enough reason all by itself for us to start practicing human respect instead.
Jim, one of the issues that we come across, and I like to ask all of our guests this question, because it's not obvious to a lot of people, these ideas about respecting the liberties of other people. I think maybe a lot of this is because we all come through a public school system that's government run, so all the solutions tend to be government solutions that we talk about in those schools. And if you want something, you got to vote for it or something like that. But what rang your liberty bell? How did you come to see some of these ideas on liberty that you've got?
I was raised conservative. My father was a Goldwater Republican. Jack Kemp was my hero in the 1980s. I was a college Republican, and I was one of the people in the collegiate network that was putting out a independent conservative student newspaper on my campus. I cheered when the contract with America was when the Republicans swept into power in 1995 under Newt Gingrich. But a year later, they picked Bob Dole, snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. And I couldn't vote for him. And I started calling my friends who were shocked to hear me say, I'm not going to be able to vote for Bob Dole. And they said, well, you're going to elect Bill Clinton for president. And I said, well, thank you. I wish I had that much power, but I don't. I just have my vote. A couple of weeks after I made that decision, the Libertarian Party convention was on C-SPAN. I was a realtor at the time. I would come in and out the door. My television in our small home when we first got married was right in the living room, right by the front door. And I would walk in on breaks and stuff like that and turn on the TV. And I would watch a lot of C-SPAN back in the day. And there it was. And I saw Joe Sobran and James Bovard and a couple others people speak. And then I saw Harry Browne. And Harry Browne changed my life. In fact, the morning after he was nominated, he was on C-SPAN's Washington Journal. And when he described something to the effect of a Jim Beam dealer doesn't do a drive-by shooting on an alcoholic beverage store that sells Jack Daniels, right? They don't have turf wars. And if I was a cartoon character, the light bulb went off over my head. I got it. And I was a libertarian from that point forward. I had found my new home. So, my story, by the way, isn't that unique. The Advocates for Self-Government, with whom I also work, did a survey in 2021. And, one of the 2 or 3 most common paths to becoming a libertarian is a libertarian presidential campaign. And so 4 years after I was a fan of Harry Browne, I was working on his campaign when he ran again in 2000 as his press secretary.
Wow. James, can you pull up the visual again? Because I wanted to show a few of the other things that that Jim is working on. So Jim is also involved with the Advocates for Self-Government, the one he just referenced, and I've actually handed out some of their surveys as well too. I sitting at the libertarian booths at the state fair and other things like that. Kind of gives it people a sense of, hey, are you what's your orientation politically? And a lot of people, they don't realize that maybe they're maybe a little more liberty oriented they think, or maybe some people it's a rude awakening how
Yeah.
authoritarian they are.
Yes. Yes.
But yes, so he's got that going on. There's also the Zero Aggression Project that he's working on. There's a Downsize DC, and he has a podcast also called Gracearchy as well. So he's got a lot of hats going on, and is somebody who I guess who's just really trying to get the message out there.
What exactly is the Zero Aggression Project?
The Zero Aggression Project's an initiative based on the Zero Aggression Principle. We wanted to get into the thinking that goes into that. So the Zero Aggression Principle is that you should never initiate violence or use excessive force to achieve your social or political ends. And you should never even delegate that power. So that's the Zero Aggression Principle, and we wanted to get that across. And we wanted to talk. We feature something there called mental levers that describe kind of a heuristic way of thinking. What I have observed over the years, and it's been tremendously powerful for me, is that we don't have all of the facts most of the time when a news story first breaks, when there's a crisis, when the government is telling us to be very, very scared. We have to rely on a set of intellectual tools to figure out what's really going on. We can place some bets. And this is how libertarians think. We tend to say the following thing is likely to happen if we go down this particular course. And we lay those out in the mental levers. We share kind of some of the tips and tricks that we use in our thinking.
Okay. Just curious, because you say zero aggression. So would you generally characterize yourself as more of a minarchist then, or an anarchist? Because I know that's one of the things that kind of gets into the weeds, but as people start talking about zero
I don't
aggression,
like the term anarchist. I understand what many people mean by it. I think it's the wrong term to use completely. I don't believe in no rules, and I don't necessarily believe in no rulers. In fact, we advocate at the Zero Aggression Project something called consumer-controlled governance. We believe the state shouldn't govern. There shouldn't be coercive government. But as a voluntarist, that's how I would describe myself. We believe that individuals should be able to choose all of their relationships, whether it's with business associates, whether it's the services that they need, or even the governments that they choose. And I believe that we would have actually a spawning of many very specialized governments that would occur if we had the state out of the way. I think people would still, for example, want security services, and they would find ways to contract and obtain that. And so I prefer to call that voluntarist, because it's a choice as to whom I'm going to associate with, where I'm going to get those services.
So you don't believe in the concept of limited government?
Limited by what?
Limited by a constitution.
If that would have worked, the government would be a lot smaller than it is today.
True.
And so I think that the Constitution was a major watershed bit of progress for humanity. I think it was a great thing for its time. And I think it has done a lot to protect us. I mean, we can look north of the border and see what has happened where they don't have the same written guarantees that we have. So I do think it's of value. I'm not disparaging it, but I don't think it's the future. I think if in a kind of a post-status view of the world, we would shed any attempt to delegate power to other people and allow them to have a power that we don't possess ourselves, which is to initiate violence to get what they want. That is not a good way to solve problems. We find that out when we're small children on the playground.
Yeah, it's funny too, because when you mentioned how's it working out, right? I mean, our current method, and you can watch there's the Congressional Budget Office. Unfortunately, I don't have the visual ready for this show, but it puts out a chart every year, I think it is, where it shows the debt to GDP ratio. And when they show that and you track that over time, it is tiny. It's very low at the beginning, of the country. And, when you're talking about early 1900s, it's like 3 or 4% or something. Now it's 100%, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that kind of gives you a sense of the distortion that's going on as far as all that government. It's just how much how much bigger the footprint is increasing over time, with our government. And the CBO is literally projecting that that's just heading, I guess, north as in high.
Yeah. And Leon, I would add, if we actually used the interpretive key that was provided by the founders of the 9th and 10th Amendments, if those were actually practiced, we would be in significantly better shape today. If I thought those arguments were compelling on any level, if I thought that they would prevent people from using government for their own ends against one another, and sometimes in very cheap, cheesy fashion, just to get the other side to cry. If I thought we could put an end to that with the 9th and 10th Amendment, that's probably what I would focus on, because that would get us a long way to where we needed to go. And then we could focus on fixing other social problems. But I've become persuaded that we just have to get rid of all of the initiative force. The way that the government is funded. It's funded through a form of extortion and theft. And the fact that they're able to take funds, that they don't have to earn them in any way, shape, takes away a certain degree of accountability and efficiency that we benefit from in so many other areas of our lives. And as a result, everything that follows starts to be trouble. If you took away that essential funding mechanism from them, the power to tax, and they had to actually serve customers, be of service to the people that wanted their product, then you would have a much higher degree of accountability. And I think that's where we need to go. We call that consumer controlled governance.
So in the consumer controlled governance, there'll be no central authority per se, is what you're saying.
I don't think it's necessary.
And James, maybe you could bring back our visual again. I just pulled this up, and it's the Brookings Institute on this one that I pulled up. But this is essentially the CBO's chart that they're reprinted here, and you can just track that over time, right? There was a fairly big footprint when the government first started, because one, there wasn't a whole lot of productivity, and they wound up having to fund a war just to get become free. But you can see it's very, very low early on in the country, and it's just every war that essentially spikes it. But at some point, we kind of get away from reducing that size of government relative to the size of our economy, and it just keeps growing and growing. And the CBO is literally projecting this is just going sky high in the future, which is not a good sign.
Right. And when we first formed Downsize DC, it was largely on this basis. There are two parties in Washington. One is the tax and spend party. The other is the borrow and spend party. Sometimes they switch scripts. And if you notice, both of them are spending. And the spending is the problem. So if we took all the money that they collect and we piled it high like autumn leaves, and then we set those leaves on fire, burned them, just completely consumed them and didn't use them for anything, we would actually be better off, because the problem is the things that they do with the money. They do terrible, terrible things with the money, hideous things in some cases. And so that power needs to be taken away from people who didn't earn it, and it needs to be reallocated to people who would have more accountability. In a consumer-controlled government, you would have more power. We just think about it. You have more power as a consumer than you do as a taxpayer. If you don't like the fact that you said, I don't want mayo on my burger, and they put it on anyway, you have a number of different remedies available to you, and probably a company that is eager to serve and please you. And you still don't have to go back, and you could still leave a bad review on Yelp or wherever. And so you have so much power that we don't enjoy as taxpayers. You are just one person in a sea of people, and you're constantly fighting to be part of that majority that will get control. And when you have 50% plus one, that equals 100% of the power. And that's just not really a good situation to get happiness, or to achieve social harmony, or to maximize our prosperity.
Yeah.
So in consumer controlled governance in such a society, what will happen to say something like the military?
Well, we have seen firsthand, we have experience as Americans. We got to experience it in Vietnam, and the Soviets got to experience it in Afghanistan, and we got to experience it again in Afghanistan, that guerrilla fighters can do an awful lot. This is not a country that is worth invading. Even Japanese admirals knew this before they attacked World War II. We didn't have a theater of action here. The theater of action was over there. I can understand why some other countries would be much more fearful about their military existential situation. But we here are relatively secure, and we have the ability to gear up in a very rapid basis. It also has not been traditionally very difficult to get people wrapped up and ready to go to war. If the need arises, they would support it. And so the thing that people always wonder about is, could we fund a sufficient military? I think that's asking the question backwards. People will always fund their own security. Survival is a primary human value. And to the degree that they need to do that, they will devote their resources to it. Most of the time, that's not where we need to devote our resources. We have a military that's far, far bigger than what we would choose to pay for if we did it voluntarily. And then that military, because it's so big and the contracts are so large, needs to turn over some of its products so it can keep the machine going. And so there's a military industrial complex that Dwight Eisenhower warned us about. And we believe that the world and our country would actually be much more secure if funding for the military was voluntary. We've laid out that case in an adjunct site that breaks off from Zero Aggression Project called wartruth.org, where we go through the history. Perry Willis wrote up a history. He read all the books, so you don't have to, kind of thing, and laid out war by war what happened and what the truth is, and whether or not it left us better off. And so you can check out those arguments at wartruth.org.
Well, it is kind of funny when you mention, that how well guerrilla fighters can do as well, because, I mean, you could have an incompetent warlord like Joe Biden who just literally arms you for decades to come by leaving all the weapons out on the field as he runs away.
That's exactly right.
So, but, it is interesting, though, because, or Tim, were you trying to say something, or?
Yeah, I went with the muted mic like an idiot. Yeah.
Well, why don't you jump in, because I don't want to cut you off.
Yeah, I was just going to ask Jim what his thoughts were on the on whatever mutually assured destruction or whatever motivation for people to not go into a nuclear situation. How that would play out, for example, just in a future scenario with a smaller military United States, would another country, say China, for example, that maybe had nuclear weapons, and if they threatened us with annihilation and we didn't have any, for example, just in this scenario, just for the sake of argument, how would that play out? Would we be able to be victimized? Would we say, hey, give us your best shot? Would we have a method of countering that threat, so that we're not like taken over by China? I don't know.
So let me start by asking you a question there, Tim. Let me start with a question. If you knew that China had weapons pointed at the United States, would you want there to be nuclear weapons pointed back?
I think my human natural reaction would be to say yes, but I don't know. Maybe in absence of an argument that was persuasive against that, my first reaction would be yes, I would.
So we don't have time to go down
that. Definitely yes. I would want some form of protection against the possibility.
So would you be willing to help fund, or extol the virtue of to other people who are capable of funding an institution that provided that service?
God, yeah, I see where you're going. Yeah, then I would. Yes, okay. Yeah, I would. Of course. Long term, I would want to have talks of paring back everybody's nuclear weapons, and
I would too. But in the time that we've got available, I want to make clear that people assume that things won't be there if it's not funded. So the question always comes down to who funds these things, right? As Harry Brown used to say, was it the Russians? Was it the Martians? No, we pay for everything. But on the way to paying for it, a lot of graft and corruption gets added on top of it. It's really kind of hard for me to believe we couldn't fund an adequate defense with a lot more efficiently, a lot less costly to us as human beings, as working people, that we could have the security that we wanted. If we wanted those services to exist, they would exist.
Well, and on the flip side of this,
good.
Well, Tim, I was thinking too, on the flip side of this as well. I mean, think of all the people we're pointing these weapons at who aren't pointing those weapons at us as well.
Yes.
I mean, we're
Yep.
we're literally funding that, and we really don't have a choice in it. And how many people are essentially facing American bullets who maybe we might not approve of individually facing
Mhm.
American bullets? So Jim, we're starting to get closer to the end of the show, and I didn't want to let it go without asking you, what are some of the successes that you've achieved in some of these different endeavors you've had?
Oh, it's fun to go back and reminisce. I took a case all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. We lost on both counts, 5-4 and 6-3. But we challenged the McCain-Feingold law, the campaign finance restrictions. And that was a monumental accomplishment. I got to sit and listen to my case being argued in the Supreme Court, which was, pretty cool. But one of our partners in that action was an organization that became a household name less than a decade later, Citizens United. And Citizens United ended up scoring a landmark decision that allowed basically for unlimited First Amendment expression, free press rights. We actually pioneered an argument called the free press argument, which made the distinction. In the First Amendment, the rights are all separated by conjunctions or and preceded by the definite article the. So there is the right of free speech. There is the right of freedom of the press. And we made this argument. The difference between a speech and press is that you can publish or print press, right? And that always costs money. You need funds to do that. So we advanced that argument, and I was proud of that. We also we filed amicus briefs in that case. I think helpful ones. But we also did that in the Jones case, which changed Fourth Amendment jurisprudence. The property right had been lost in 1968 officially, and it became a right of privacy. And we helped bring the right of property, the property right question back into the equation in 2012, 13, that time frame in the Jones v. U.S. case. And last, I talked about heuristics at the Zero Aggression Project before. One of ours was, surprise, this will come as a shock, politicians tend to lie. And so, especially about war. And we did a site called truthaboutwar.org. It's still there. You can go look at it in time, truthaboutwar.org, where we warned or spoke of what was the truth about what was of the 2003 invasion. We put that up before it happened. We made the startling claim at the time that Saddam Hussein did not have weapons of mass destruction. I was scared later they would plant them. Frankly, like a bad cop at the scene of a crime would plant a gun. I thought maybe they would pull that off, but we didn't. The evidence, if you went looking for it, which our media did not, showed that he didn't have those weapons. I'm very, very proud of the work that we did at truthaboutwar.org. And I think it's the kind of thing that libertarians are capable of doing because of our philosophy. We can almost see the future. Unfortunately, sometimes we feel like Cassandra when we do so.
Well, we're almost out of time, but do you have like a final thought you'd like to leave with everybody who's watching?
Yeah. The solution to every problem that libertarians are experiencing is that there's not enough of us. We need more of us. Go find others. And if you can, get them to put some skin in the game, because where your treasure is, there's where your heart's at as well. And people will get more involved and more committed if they do that. So I think that's the key thing, is to find as many of us as we possibly can. And there's studies that indicate that there may be as many as 60 million of us who basically believe the government is too big, does too much, and interferes in our life too much. And so I encourage people, go find people just like you.
Awesome. And you can start the process by going to respectamerica.org and checking out Jim's work there. But thanks, Jim, for joining us today. And thank you all for watching. And until the next time, stay free.
Yes, indeed. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, always and forever.
Thank you for listening to the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast. Find us on Facebook, Rumble, YouTube, your favorite podcast network, and at knuckleheadsofliberty.com.